right, we are finally to the heart of algebra. This is everything that we have been working towards this year, and that is solving equations. We're going to look at one-step equations first, and one-step equations are really fairly easy. If you read it, you'll know how to solve it. What I'm going to show you guys how to do is called the do-undo operation, and that's because we are now working with SADMAP, and we talked about that before. It's the opposite of PEMDAS. When I look at an equation, I can see and say what it says, but then I have to say, well, how do I solve this? The solving it is working PEMDAS backwards. If I see or say addition or subtraction, the opposite is what I'm going to undo it with, and that's addition or subtraction. Multiply and divide would be the next step, with the exception of if there's parentheses in there. When we get into two-step equations, you'll see why. So multiply and divide go together. Finally, I have an exponent, and then lastly, I have parentheses. This comes into play if the parentheses are true parentheses. A lot of times with equations, we never use parentheses to solve an equation. So if I'm reading this, a something minus 7, a number minus 7 equals 10, all those things you were taught to say before, say it whatever you want, however you want to do it. Something minus 7 is 10. So the is what it says. I just heard myself say something minus 7. The undo of that, since I said subtraction, is addition. So I'm going to add 7. What am I going to add 7 to? I'm going to add 7 to 10. So 10 plus 7 is 17. And now I have solved it. Now I can check it. 17 minus 7 is 10. Yep, sounds good to me. One of the things you want to look for is how the equation is written. If you understand this, it works. A lot of times I suggest that you rewrite it, which are not in like proper form. And proper form really means like the variable comes first. There's lots of other ways to understand how to solve equations besides do and undo. If I were using a different method, which is what I usually stress in my topics class, I would rewrite this one because the variable doesn't come first. But it doesn't really matter. If you want to leave it, you can. The reason I suggest rewriting it is because this says 8 plus something is 19. I'm not plussing the something. That's not my do. So what I want to do is change this around. So it says something plus 8 equals 19. The plus comes from the fact that this 8 is positive. If this 8 were negative, it would have said something minus 8. And you'll see those as we get through two-step equations as well. So something plus 8 is 19. It tells me to add 8 to something to get 19. The opposite of that from SADMAP then is to subtract 8. If I say add, its opposite is subtract. So what am I going to subtract from? I'm going to subtract from 19. 19 minus 8 is 11. The reading becomes really important when you're talking about multiplication and division. Most of us don't say this correctly. Most of us say this is negative 45 equals 5y. 5y is not an operation. This says 5 times something is negative 45. I don't really have to reverse this one. If you want to, you can. You can read it backwards this way. So it says 5 times something is negative 45. It says times 5. Going back to SADMAP, if I say multiply, its opposite is divide. So I'm going to divide by 5. I'm going to divide negative 45 by 5. Now hopefully you don't need a calculator to do this, so let me give you a little reminder about positive and negative signs. If there's only one negative sign in the problem, my answer has to be negative. If there were 2 negative signs in this problem, my answer would have to be positive. So going back, 45 divided by 5 is 9. And I just put the negative there because I knew where it went. So this one says 12 times z equals 72. 12 times. If you want to write it the way you say it, write it that way. The opposite of that is divide by 12. What am I going to divide by 12? What am I undoing? The 72. 72 divided by 12, if you don't know, grab a calculator, of course, is 6. So we've done add and subtract, multiplication, because I really want to stress to you guys to read it as multiply, not just 5y. And finally, division. Division is the one that's tricky. Most of us say this division problem fine, something divided by 3 is 15, and then we use our basic facts and say, oh, it's 5. It's not going to be 5. It says a big number divided by 3 gives me a smaller number. So it says divide by 3. The opposite of that is to multiply by 3. And I'm going to multiply 15 times 3. 15 times 3 is 45. Here's one where I want to caution you. There is no such thing as a negative variable. This is where the rewrite those equations comes in. I don't want this negative on the variable. I'm going to put it on the bottom. So this doesn't say negative b divided by 2. It says b divided by a negative 2. So something divided by a negative 2 is 9. 9 times a negative 2. First I look at the negative sign. There's only 1 in the problem, so my answer has to be negative. And then I say 9 times 2. So my answer is negative 18. Anytime I finish this, I can go back and check it. I can use a calculator. It says negative 18 divided by a negative 2. There would be 2 negatives in that problem. So I ignore them. My answer is positive. 18 divided by 2 is 9. If you need more help, please let me know, and hopefully this is handy in solving one-step equations. If you can do it in your head, you shouldn't have to show any work.